And hi, I'm Corinne Brown. I'm with Community Resources for Science. I'm our teacher membership coordinator. And we have put together this series of professional development workshops this spring. So the link you see on this on the screen today is the one where you can sign up for additional workshops. We have one happening on Saturday, which Eric Havel, who is here with us today, is hosting. And then we also have 3 more after that. So please take advantage of that. I think a few of you are already signed up for some of those. But today we are really lucky to have Ilana here with us from KQED to teach us more about how to make our own infographics, and we'll get a chance to try it out ourselves. So go ahead, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Corinne. It's awesome to see you all here after a long day, I'm sure. A hot day for a lot of you. 97 might be the winner there. In San Francisco here, it rarely gets that hot. So I'm almost a little jealous, but not quite. So I'm going to drop the slides that I'll be using for this presentation in the chat. There are lots of links that are going to be useful during the presentation, and you're 100% welcome to use these slides if you find them useful with your students or reference them later, anything like that. This slide is very similar to the one before, so I'm going to skip ahead. But if you're just joining us now, definitely feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Love to hear and see where everyone is connecting from. And the bit.ly at the bottom is the same as the link that I just put in the chat, so no worries. This is me. I'm Ilana Somasunderam, and I currently work at KQED, which is the public media station in Northern California. I'm the program manager for STEM professional learning. I have a background in teaching, though. I taught high school science, biology, chemistry, and AP environmental science. I also did a lot of outdoor education work in the Golden Gate National Parks. And so I'm excited to get started with you on making infographics that will hopefully be useful in your science context. For those of you, since we are lucky to have people from all over the place here, just a little background on what KQED is. We are the public media station in Northern California, and we're lucky to have a dedicated education team that really is meant to support media literacy skills in teachers and in students. There are lots of different ways that we do this. We have an online platform for teachers called KQED Teach. We host a bunch of free courses on media production and media literacy. So I'll give you more information about the specific courses that we run, but they're really meant to be practical, and you create things that will be useful in your classrooms. We also support the PBS Media Literacy Educator Certification Program, which is just a way to validate your skills around media literacy education. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely check that out. You can put little badges on your profile, on your social media profiles, things like that. We have stuff that's meant for students directly. We have an online platform for middle and high school students to practice civil dialogue and media making, and that's on KQED Learn. The site is actually split up into topics, each of which have a short video, and then a place for students to engage in discussion with each other. A lot of the topics are around socio-scientific issues, and it's really meant to get students to think critically about how science impacts them and their communities. So those are some things that you might want to check out. PBS Learning Media, many of you might know this, but it's just a repository of thousands and thousands of PBS resources, videos, images, audio pieces, image collections with lesson plans and other resources. So it's just a great place for educators to go if you're looking for content. Today, we're really gonna actually jump in and make infographics and talk about what makes a good data visualization or infographic. We'll explore some tools together, and we'll give you a couple of options depending on what might be most useful for you and your students. And then again, yeah, we're gonna jump in and actually get started and make infographics, really simple ones ourselves. I'll mention here that please feel free to take these slides and use them however you'd like after this workshop. We really encourage you to not have to start from scratch. So anything that you want to just take and use with your students, we totally encourage that. So one thing that I always forget to do, this is why I made a whole slide for it. We would love if you would take a moment to just sign in. That will allow us to follow up with you to kind of summarize all the resources that we talked about. And you can opt in for our newsletter, which basically just kind of lets you know about all of the things that we're offering. Again, we're public media, so everything that we offer is free for educators and students. And so we're not trying to sell you anything, so don't worry. So if you, whenever you get a chance, we would super appreciate if you would fill that out. It's just a couple of questions. And one other thing I'll mention is if you find that infographics are something that you really enjoy doing and you want to explore it more with your students, I wanted to share an opportunity for a project that is designed for science teachers who want to incorporate more engineering practices into their classes. And we use media making through either an infographic or a video to encourage students to work through the design process, but we focus on the communication piece. How are students communicating the solutions that they design? And then we publish every single student media piece that's submitted, which I remember as a science teacher, there were lots of contests, but only like 10 submissions or so would get highlighted. In this case, we want to showcase all student created media. All the resources are linked here, so you can check out, there's a whole curriculum and student examples are up right now. So something, if you're like into media making after this and you wanna do a whole project with your students, this is something that you can go to later. So we're gonna do a really quick overview of like what data visualization and then what infographics are. So there are lots of different forms of data visualizations. Infographics are one type, and often they incorporate multiple types of data visualization into a single graphic. You can see here that there's maps, timeline, there's like the kind of traditional long form infographic that like I'm used to, or like what pops into my head when I think of an infographic. There are more traditional like bar graphs or circle, like pie charts, things like that, that we often think of when we hear graph. So there are lots of different ways to visualize information. And when we combine them together, we can create a single graphic that's an infographic or just data in visual terms. So I wanted to show you an example of an infographic. Here you can see one that makes visual the extinction risks for various categories of species, such as birds. I know if you're on a small screen, you're probably not going to be able to read this, but we see here that's birds. We have here mammals, amphibians here. And in order to create this simple-ish infographic, the creator needed information. So I'm curious if you all want to drop some ideas in the chat. What do you think this data set looks like on the back end to create this infographic? And folks can also, I think, unmute maybe. Do you all have the, okay. Or in the chat, either way. I see a couple of cells in an Excel table, spreadsheet. Yes and yes. Spreadsheet or report. Yeah, that's definitely what comes to mind whenever I think of data sets. The amount, more specifically, the amount of species that are extinct, lots of numbers. Need overall numbers of species and estimated extinction rates. Maybe it's a chart. So I'll actually show you, you can read more about this whole, how they, the methodology and everything on Science Friday. So it's kind of both. Like there's the simplified table that was used to create the infographic, but behind even that table, which is already a lot of information to digest, there is a set of files. I think, what are there, 11 of them here, something like that, all of which like my computer couldn't even open all of these because I didn't have the appropriate software. That is to say that there's a lot of data that went into making that simple infographic. Now you're probably maybe not going to be working with these kinds of large data sets with students, but you might be. And so I just wanted to put that there to show you that there are different levels of complexity that you might be working with. But then when you think about the crazy data set on the left versus the simple infographic on the right, you can definitely see that, yes, it's a lot of work to go from these large data sets to a visually appealing graphic, but think about the impact on the reader, the accessibility of the information, and then also just the creativity involved. Like, it's just, there's a lot you have to think about when you're designing something like this. What's going to make the most impact? What information do I want to highlight? So we're going to look at a couple of infographic examples, and you'll get to kind of analyze what you think works and doesn't work about each of them. So we'll look at 3 examples. This one, so we're just, you know, in full transparency, we are an NPR station, so there is going to be a lot of like public media examples in here. So this, you can see an infographic from NPR. Feel free to drop in the chat, what do you think works about this infographic and what don't you think works? And also you can unmute if you prefer. It's maybe a bit too busy, but maybe the colors are great. The bold graphics perhaps work. Maybe the colors. Do the colors make you think of something in particular? Or the iconography, the flag. So like NPR colors, right? That's National Public Radio. There might be a little too much information though. Even though it's decently organized, it might be too much. And how are they related to each other, these pieces of information? Maybe like the little text here is a little too small. But I see here that some folks are saying that the images are like the appropriate images that you would use to talk about each of those topics. Those are really great observations. We'll try it again with another one. And you'll see here that even professional infographics aren't perfect. So what works about this infographic and what doesn't? So the sizes are scaled. So the area of the circle maybe corresponds with some sort of amount. The text is pretty small for sure. The colors, what do they even mean? The colors don't necessarily work for you. And that could be for a lot of reasons, but for me, I like don't necessarily know what the color corresponds to. I see represents data spatially and numerically. It's nice because there are a couple of different ways you might be able to read this. But yeah, some folks might like the color. It's, to me, kind of calming when I look at it. But the print is hard to read. The numbers in the middle could be incorporated into the bubbles. So that might be a design technique that you would want to use. And maybe you would want to know more. And sometimes that's a good strategy to use when creating a graphic, because maybe it's part of a longer story and you want people to be intrigued to read on, but maybe it's just not enough information for you to even understand the point of the infographic. The title is small. Yeah, it's also, well, for me, it looks cut off on the screen, but yeah, the title is small, and you like that the size changes with the percentages. I think that's definitely one of the strong points of this infographic for sure. That's not always the case. That's kind of one of the rules when you're representing data, right? Like it's definitely misrepresenting information if you don't have the size correspond with the number. So that's definitely something to think about for sure. This is a student created infographic here. This is from a 6th grade student in San Francisco. So I'm curious what you think works and what doesn't work. Nice images, which were all created by the student. Even though it says it's on Piktochart, they actually created the images on Google Drawing, which is pretty awesome. Any other observations about this? And the student is not here, but she gives our permission to critique her work. So it would be nice to have a title. Good colors, but maybe a little busy. You can see a connection. That's a good point. Having understanding how the information is connected to each other, where your eye should be drawn to and what should come next is definitely something to think about. The text is a little small. A lot like these, I don't think I could read those. What do the dates mean? That's a good question, right? So some of these things, it's just like you want to know more. The colors mimic polluted water, which is cool. That's a good observation. Feels like two different graphics and maybe they would work separately better, right? The top and the bottoms kind of seem a little disconnected. Maybe there needs to be something to show how they're connected. The citations could be presented as footnotes that might help it be less cluttered. These are really awesome observations. And I'm curious from you all now, after seeing those three, what do you think the must-haves for an infographic might be? And, you know, there might be others that surface as you start to design your own. Title is really helpful just to ground us in what we're looking at, for sure. Colors should be appropriate. They should be colorful, but also easy to read and quick, right? It's infographics, you like them because you can get a lot of information in a kind of short amount of time. Should have accurate numerical data. That's super important, from reliable sources. That's another thing to integrate into an infographics lesson with students, especially in science. A purpose, like what, after looking at this infographic, should people be driven to some action? A great point. And then not too cluttered. These are all things that I've kind of created a list based on what other folks have said in other workshops. And most of the things that are here have been mentioned. There are a couple that were said in the chat that I want to add to this later. So you all can, if you do this with students, collaboratively come up with this list together. But all of the things that you've mentioned are really great, and I will definitely capture them here, the things that I've missed. Another thing, when you're talking to students who haven't really had a lot of practice in design, they might have made posters before or something like that, but if you want to like really break it down for them, these 4 categories are really helpful. So text, iconography, or like the images, the simplified images that you see, color, which you all mentioned, and then layout, like how is my eye being drawn to the different parts of the infographic. So those are kind of the categories that you might want to use with students. I wanted to drop these in here. We won't get into too much detail with them, but it's always nice when you're having your students do a media making project for them to see other student work and not just professional examples. And so these are some really great 6th grade examples of infographics that were done in a science classroom. So feel free to share these with your students as they're making their own as well. So finding data sets. This is oftentimes the most daunting part of creating infographics. When I hear the term data set, I automatically imagine giant spreadsheets, thousands of rows, columns, numbers, and they can be, and they often are. But I encourage you to kind of like broaden your idea of what a data set is. It's really just a collection of information. So you can find it pretty much anywhere, including in a biography, for example. Personal experience can be a source of data, and that's what we're going to use to create our own infographics here today. Obviously, peer-reviewed journal articles or other places you can find data sources. And you can also search online for data sets. I put some links to websites that have been useful for me to find information, but there are other credible sources that you can definitely explore. one place to start is really just doing a Boolean search, like open data plus whatever your topic is. But again, you want to make sure that whatever data you're getting is actually from a reliable source, which is a whole other workshop. But we also have resources for that. So those are some places to find data, but you can also gather data yourselves. And that can be personal information, which in a 1-hour workshop it's a lot quicker than collecting data from doing maybe an experiment or something like that. So that's what we're gonna do today. And so I'm gonna drop in the chat, and it's also linked in the slides, a very quick Google form, and it's kind of inspired by Earth Month and just our connection to nature. And I'm hoping we'll spend just a couple of minutes filling out that form, and then we'll get to check out our collective results, and you'll be able to use those data in your own infographics. So I just dropped the link. Hopefully it works. Please let me know if it doesn't. We're good? Okay, cool. And I'll give you a moment to just fill that out and check back in a couple minutes. So it looks like we've got about 8 or so responses. Oh, 9. It's just popped. One just popped in. So take another minute or so just to finish that. You don't have to think too hard. Just whatever comes to mind initially is totally fine. And for anyone who's ready and you're just curious what other people are thinking about, you can check out the results here, and I'll kind of explain what we'll do with those after. All right, it looks like most people have submitted it. Thank you so much for doing that. If you're still working on it, no worries. Well, you can always add it later. So again, I mentioned that like this is one way for you to collect information from students. Sorry, but the timer goes again. And you can change, obviously you can change these questions to be whatever you want them to be for your students. It can relate to something that you're already teaching them about. You can use it as an introduction activity in the beginning of the year, for instance, like as a get to know you activity. So there are lots of different directions you can go with these. What I'm going to ask you all to do is use whatever you want from the collection of data that we have together, plus any personal connections that you have to nature to create your own infographic. And there are a couple of tool options. Actually, there are like hundreds of options, but I'm going to kind of compare 2 of them. These are ones that we like to use with teachers because They're either free or freemium. Piktochart is really amazing because there are built-in templates. It's customizable. There are built-in icons. It looks super professional. It's freemium though, which means the free version does not have all the features, and there's a watermark, and you can only have up to 5 visuals at any given time. So that's just considerations for that. Google Slides or Google Drawings is free, and perhaps you're already familiar with using this tool. Sometimes, because you're kind of starting from scratch, unless you create your own template or use the one that I created for you, it might look a little less polished if you're not as comfortable. So you might want to think about, as you choose a tool to use today, what might be most useful for your students. Perhaps you know what tools your district provides. Maybe it's something like Canva that you're already familiar with, and that's totally okay too. There are other software that has infographics templates as well, like Canva, for instance. I know a few people have asked about that in the past. So for both of the options, the Piktochart option or the Google Drawing or Google Slides option, it's pretty similar. If you're doing the Google Slides, I did make a template that is, I'll let it do its thing. So I did my kind of connection to the environment infographic here, just as an example for you all to build off of. And I'll zoom in a little bit. It'll take a little less time to load. So obviously this is not from our data that we just collected here, but you can have a section for native plants. For instance, your favorites. Perhaps I did this with the class, and these are the top 4 native plants in our class. So I found icons that might represent each of these. Obviously, this is not a coast redwood, and plant biologists might be like, that is not a coast redwood, but it's more of a symbol of a coast redwood for me. So you can see here that I answered a couple of questions that are individual to me. So I reflected on how I got around this year. And I also reflected on memorable moments in nature for myself. So you can use these as kind of a guide, but you definitely don't need to keep to these exact prompts. You can actually change them here. I put some sample prompts that you might want to use for your students on the side. Our collaborative data that we just, hopefully populated by now, that you can check out to create your infographic. The other thing that I want to mention is, if you do this method, there's an add-on that allows you access to icons in Google Slides, which is really helpful. So if you just go to add-ons and get add-ons, there's kind of a tutorial thing on the side. You'll see that you can, noun project and flat icon both have options. So I'm going to start the one for flat icon, and you can see that it'll show up here, all the ones that I used recently, but also I can search for icons that I want to use in my infographic directly in Google Slides. I can also choose to use Piktochart, which once you go to Piktochart, you'll find that there are a lot of example templates that you might want to use. So whichever, this is the one that I'm on, whichever one you choose to do, it's pretty much the same flow. Go to the thing, use our collaborative data or your own personal data to create the infographic. And then we hope you will share your infographic if you would like. So how to get the add-on in the slides. So if I go to, I'm going to go back to this slide. So I have my template. For some reason, whenever I'm, that's not helpful for you. Whenever I'm sharing my screen, it has a bar on the top and I can't access. But here we go. So I'm going to go to the top, and there's an add-on. And I'll go to get add-ons to first install them. And then I can search for flat icon, or I think it's one word. And then I've already gotten it installed, but you can install it. I like flat icon a little better than noun project, but you can grab them both. They both have free versions. You'll notice some of them are premium, but I find with flat icon, there's like enough that I can get the point across. Yeah, so that's kind of the basic gist. And I will be here in the chat while you all are working on your infographics. I'm not going to start it. Oh. So we'll take about 15 minutes to do this. And again, I'll go back here. Think about which tool might be most useful for your particular context. Do you know that your school probably doesn't allow students on, external sites, and Google might be the best version? Does your school already subscribe to an account? Then you might want to use Piktochart. So think about that, and then we'll take perhaps, yeah, I think we do have 15 minutes to work on this. So we'll take the full 15 minutes. I'll be here in the chat. I'm going to drop the slides one more time. That has everything is linked out. So you all can access all of the stuff. And feel free to reach out if you all have any questions while you're working. Happy creating. And we'll come back together. You don't have to sign off the Zoom or anything. We'll come back in about 14 minutes or so. The share doc, and you'll have access to that so that you can revisit those later. So I wanted to allow you to think about doing something like this with your students. And you may be using data that you all collectively contribute to, that you collect on your own, or there might be a data set that you have in mind. Or there might be a major theme that you're going to be addressing with students. And so those are some of the ways that you can think about how to implement an infographic project with students. So if you'd like to, and you have something in mind that you want to share in the chat, it's always useful for folks to, brainstorm together and build off of each other's ideas. So that's another thing that you can do if you'd like to share in the chat. So a couple of examples, if you have a data set in mind, like maybe you want your students to analyze a data set of privately owned public spaces in San Francisco in order to make recommendations about the use of these spaces. Perhaps you're thinking about ecosystem services and you don't really know what data set you want to use yet. Maybe you'll even have students find these data sets. So those are some ways that you might think about doing an infographics project. I also mentioned that you can use it as an introduction activity for students as they're getting to know each other. Their infographics can have personal things about themselves. So, and definitely it can be a choice, right? Like students who maybe you have an assignment that's usually a writing assignment, but you want to give students the option to create an infographic instead. A lot of the same skills and more are developed through an infographic. So I like that Lori put that as a choice in a PBL final product. So those are some good options. You're welcome to share in the chat, but I just definitely wanted to kind of mention, you're here for a reason. You know that this connects to the things that students are learning, but I just wanted to make sure that, I mentioned that like we're hitting a lot of the science and engineering practices through creating infographics. Things like cross-cutting concepts like scale, proportion, and quantity, when you're thinking about representing data visually, like you have to think about those things. So you're not necessarily only hitting on media literacy skills when doing a project like an infographics project. This is a brain dump. I will probably add more things here, but they're all just links to resources that we've found useful. Just things to explore, including our template here, a bunch of different platforms that you can use and try out and see what might work best. Perhaps the add-on thing is not working for you, but you might find another platform that your district actually has a subscription for, or you found a good freemium tool. So just places to explore, data sets, places to find data sets. So definitely check that out. I mentioned this a bit earlier, but we do have a project that's really based around infographics and video. And if you're looking for something that's an engineering design focused unit, this is a good place to go. Everything is linked here. There's a curriculum, there's a student facing materials as well. And again, we really at KQED, we're a public media station. We're all about elevating student voice. And so we like to publish everything. There are select pieces that air on your local public media station. So KQED will sometimes put on the radio or on their digital, they'll highlight certain student pieces, but every single student piece gets to be on KQED Learn, which I really appreciate. And we also have courses coming up. Our next one is on video production. That's this summer. And we also have one for audio production. If you're interested in diving deeper into graphic and interactive media production, this is only an hour. So we go really into the details about designing infographics and designing lessons around infographics projects with students. If you're interested in like the finding reliable information and analyzing online media, the Analyzing and Evaluating Media for the Classroom is a good course. So all of this is free. Everything we have is free. So just feel free to check it out in your own time. And then I'm always available by email. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I always love to hear from you, whether it's questions, ideas, or you just are proud of something that your students have done. Would love to connect, and I'll stick around for a bit if you all are having questions, if it's tech support that I can help with, or any kind of workarounds. I'm happy to work through any of the challenges that you all are facing. But thanks so much for being here. I don't know, Corinne, if you have any like closing thing that I
No, I just wanted to really thank you for taking your time to join us and share your expertise with these great teachers. And we'll share it out both to you guys who have been here today and then everybody who signed up as well. And I'm going to put the link back in the chat for the rest of our spring PD series as well that are free and being hosted by more community partners. And so please check those out if you haven't already. We'd love to see you there. And yeah, we can hang around for a little while and get some questions answered. Like I figured out my add-on wasn't coming on because the slide I had opened was in my personal Gmail account and I added it to my work Gmail account. So there you go.
I'm glad you figured it out.
Where are the professional development workshops located that
I shouldn't assume that we all figure they're all online.
Right. But where can we find those online?
Oh yeah, they're linked. Sorry. Where now means a lot of different things. So like if you click on enroll here in the slide, but I can also put that in the chat. And you'll find all of them there. And yes, they're online.
Thanks for this.
And you can check with your district. A lot of districts offer hours and stuff for the courses. So something to look into.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining.
I'm excited about learning about where to find more icons. And do you have other places you like going for like clip art as well that's like able to be used publicly?
Yeah, there is like there's a Creative Commons search. So if you're looking for like beyond icons, you want like photos and things like that, Creative Commons search. Let's see.
Yeah, I think I found one link maybe on your stuff that I've looked at before.
Yeah.
Although
Um,
still sometimes it comes up with ones that are supposed to be fee-based, and yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, a lot of them will be like, you can use this, but you need to cite it, which we always encourage anyway.
Yeah.
So these are some that if you find any other good ones, like I would love to add them here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was a good, quick, fun way to kind of dig into it. So appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely just to start, but yeah, thank you for.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I love. Yeah, over the years, like my PowerPoints and Google Slides have been less and less words and more pictures in the same vein, just because these pictures speak so much more than or like make them work with it. Like what you're saying is not necessarily redundant to what you're seeing, but that they pair.
Right.
You know. I have a question. So I was trying to figure out. Like I created this pie chart and then I linked it, like I made a copy of it and I copied it onto the infographic. And then it asked me if I wanted to link it and I said yes. So any changes I make on it are going back there. So then you'd want to save both of those files together somewhere, right? Kind of like in a folder, since the pie chart's referencing the.
Yeah, and I think with Google, like it doesn't matter if you change the location of the file, but that's not true of like other tools. Once, for example, if you decide to like move it from your desktop into a folder later,
Right.
It like ruins the connection, is like lost. With Google, I don't think that's the case, but yeah. The other thing is, I think with Google Slides, you can like create the chart within the slide so that it automatically links, and then the spreadsheet is created in the same folder wherever your presentation is. So you can do it either way.
And I was trying to I think I just kind of, there's probably a better way, but I was trying to actually take the raw data and so I did the one about the transportation first, but I just counted that there were 16 entries and X number of them were walking versus this. So then when I did the pie chart, I just did it based on my count, but there's probably some kind of way you could have it recognize the entry or something.
Like if you wanted to teach your students